in this world that exists like that, don't be a Stephen A. Smith. Be an Admiral Hall.
When D.L. Hughley called out Stephen A. Smith, it was not a clapback or a cheap shot. It was an exposure. Not of bad wording or a single bad take, but of what happens when loud confidence replaces logic and ego starts dressing itself up as leadership. D.L. Hughley was not reacting emotionally. He was pointing out a deeper problem: the danger of confusing volume with intelligence and passion with credibility.
Accused Senator Mark Kelly, a veteran, an astronaut, of crossing the line for participating in a video reminding troops that they can refuse to follow illegal orders. Let's see some of what you said, my friend.
Sure. You know better, Senator Kelly. You know better. How dare you do that? You could go to the House. You can draw up paperwork. You can try to start articles of impeachment if you think there's something illegal. I mean, damn, it ain't like y'all haven't done it before. You impeached the man twice. Where'd that get you? Got his behind back in the White House. Had you left him alone since 2020, maybe he wouldn't be back. You don't tell military men and women to ignore an order from the commander-in-chief. You don't do that.
Caffeine's a bitch, you know?
Now let me just remind you that Pete Hegseth said in 2016, I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. Now, given the fact that the secretary himself said that, I'd love to give you the opportunity to perhaps change your position on what you said.
I'm not changing a thing.
Okay.
I didn't stutter when I said it.
You want to stay loud and wrong?
Well, you could call it loud and wrong all you want to. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. Here's the reality of the situation. First of all, I don't give a damn what Pete Hegseth has to say because I will tell you right now, he was never qualified for the job.
And you are.
When you talk about DEI and eradicating that, excuse me, what was he doing hosting Fox News on the weekend and all of a sudden he's the defense secretary? Please give me a break. I don't care what he has to say. Let me get that out the way. As it pertains to Mark Kelly, what I was talking about is military. What I did was get on the phone with family and friends who have served in the military. And I said, we're not civilians. This is not the court of law. You can be implicated for implying something if you are a former military member or you are a present military member. It wasn't what Mark Kelly said. It's the fact that he was a combat Navy pilot who served in the military who would tell folks, ignore an order when it could get them in the order.
He did not say
I said illegal. I said illegal. I'm talking about illegal. I understand that.
He said you don't have to follow an unlawful order, and that is in the military code of conduct.
And I'm saying to you, hold on, which I'm aware of.
But it didn't sound like you were aware of that.
He's aware of that. He's aware of that. Yeah.
No. I disagree with you.
Stephen, can I ask you a question?
I had two governors, by the way, text me to tell me I was wrong, and they agree with you.
You are wrong.
I had two senators that reached out to me and said, you weren't wrong at all.
Well, Mikey Sherrill did say that the reason they felt the need to put that out is they were constantly being approached by people in the military saying, we're being put in really uncomfortable situations.
But
that to me is a little more relatable when you're a veteran yourself.
But I'm saying let me say this real quick.
You gotta do it real quick. Or wait till we come back.
All I'm saying is this. If you're a member of the military, I'm looking at the soldiers and saying, don't get yourself in trouble. Let somebody else do it. Don't you do it because it ain't gonna work.
Stephen A. Smith did not just stumble into a minor controversy. He walked directly into one of the most self-inflicted public embarrassments of his career. And D.L. Hughley did not miss the moment. Stephen A. appeared on The View to discuss politics, focusing on his comments about Mark Kelly. Smith accused Kelly, a decorated Navy combat pilot and astronaut, of encouraging the military to defy the president. That accusation alone raised serious concerns. But instead of clarifying his point, acknowledging nuance, or showing even a hint of intellectual humility, Stephen A. doubled down. He got louder, more defensive, and in doing so, proved D.L. Hughley's argument in real time. Being loud does not make you right. One of the co-hosts, Sunny Hostin, calmly challenged him. She pointed out that Pete Hegseth, the sitting Secretary of Defense, had made essentially the same statement years earlier. The military does not follow unlawful orders from a commander-in-chief. same principle, same constitutional obligation. Sonny then asked a fair and direct question. Given that the Secretary of Defense himself said this, would Stephen A. like to reconsider his stance? His response was blunt and telling. I am not changing a thing. I did not stutter. That was the moment where confidence crossed into insecurity. Instead of engaging with the substance of the argument, Stephen A. pivoted to volume. He talked about calling military friends. He talked around the issue. But he refused to acknowledge that Mark Kelly's statement reflected standard military law. Then he made the situation worse. Stephen A. dismissed Pete Hegseth entirely, saying he did not care what he had to say and claiming he was never qualified for the job. Read that carefully. A sports commentator who built his platform by transitioning from basketball takes into political commentary dismissed someone else as unqualified because of their media background. That was not analysis. That was projection. This is where D.L. Hughley stepped in and dismantled Stephen A. Smith's entire posture. He did not argue volume. He did not argue party lines. He argued credibility. His point was simple and devastating. Stephen A. Smith wants political relevance without putting in the work that political seriousness requires. No policy depth, no constitutional grounding, no accountability when corrected, just confidence, volume, and ego. D.L. Hughley made it clear that Stephen A. is not dangerous because he has opinions. He is dangerous because he refuses correction.
At Leavenworth, who made really bad choices on the battlefield. And I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others.
It was never really about Mark Kelly. It was not even about Pete Hegseth. It was about a man who wants to be seen as a serious political thinker but reacts like a television debater and collapses the moment his authority is challenged. Stephen A. Smith did not lose credibility because he chose the wrong side. He lost credibility because he refused to engage with facts once they contradicted him. That is not leadership. That is noise. And D.L. Hughley saw it immediately. Stephen A. Smith is great at sports media. No one can take that away from him, but that skill does not automatically translate to political seriousness. Politics demands humility. It demands consistency. It demands the ability to say, I was wrong. Stephen A. could not do that. D.L. Hughley did not shout him down or try to overpower him. He exposed him, and once that curtain was pulled back, there was no hiding what everyone saw. A man chasing political relevance, armed with confidence, but empty on substance. Stephen A. Smith questioned Pete Hegseth's qualifications because he came from television. Let that sink in. The irony is overwhelming. A sports broadcaster turned political commentator dismissed someone else for coming from television. That alone tells you everything you need to know. Loud and wrong is not leadership. And that was exactly the point D.L. Hughley was making. But D.L. did not just criticize Stephen A.'s position. He dissected his entire approach to political commentary and exposed the flaw underneath it. D.L. pointed out that Stephen A. Smith is essentially a broadcaster who talks like he could be president, yet he questions the resume of someone who became Secretary of Defense after years of service and experience. That was not a joke. That was surgical. D.L. identified the real issue. Stephen A. is so desperate to be taken seriously in political spaces that he is willing to ignore facts, double down on bad takes, and attack other people's qualifications while lacking those same qualifications himself. Then D.L. went for the jugular. He contrasted Stephen A. Smith with Admiral William McRaven, a four-star admiral with nearly 4 decades of military service who resigned rather than follow an order he believed was unlawful. That comparison ended the conversation, because now this was not about opinions anymore. This was about character, experience, and principle. And Stephen A. does not belong in that room. That was not just a takedown. That was an exposure backed by facts and a clear understanding of what real leadership actually looks like. Here is what is really going on. And it explains everything about Stephen A.'s behavior on The View. Politics is not his wheelhouse. And when someone knows deep down that they are out of their depth, they do not stay calm. They get defensive. Think about it. When someone challenges Stephen A. on basketball, LeBron, the Cowboys, or the NBA, he does not melt down. He laughs. He explains his logic. He is comfortable, but when Sonny Hostin challenged him on Mark Kelly and basic military norms, Stephen A. immediately became combative. He raised his voice. He interrupted. He over-explained. He refused to reconsider even when presented with clear evidence. That is not confidence. That is insecurity. Stephen A. knows that most people, especially those with real military military experience, believe he is wrong on this issue. Just look at the public reaction. The message is consistent. He does not know what he is talking about, and here is the uncomfortable truth. The platforms inviting Stephen A. into political spaces are not doing it because they see him as a serious political thinker. Shows like the PBD podcast, Sean Hannity, or News Nation know exactly what they are getting. They know he will be loud. They know he will overreach. They know he will say something reckless, and that makes for good television, even if it destroys his credibility. DL Hughley saw through that immediately, and instead of matching Stephen A.'s volume, he exposed the weakness underneath it. That is why this moment hit so hard. Stephen A. was not just wrong, he was revealed. They are not taking him seriously. They are letting him talk because it is entertaining. Watching Stephen A. stumble through political commentary creates clips, outrage, and ratings. But Stephen A. thinks he is earning a real seat at the political table. And that delusion is exactly what DL Hughley exposed. Stephen A. Smith wants political relevance, and that desperation is costing him his credibility. Ask yourself this: why would someone defend an obviously incorrect position this aggressively? Why double down after multiple chances to walk it back? Why refuse to acknowledge clear facts when they are placed directly in front of you? Because admitting he was wrong would mean admitting he does not understand politics the way he understands sports. And for someone with Stephen A.'s ego, that is unacceptable. So the volume goes up, the defensiveness kicks in, the facts get ignored, and then it becomes something else entirely. Stephen A. is trying to build political capital. He is positioning himself as a convenient voice that power can point to and say, "See, we have support." And in doing that, he is sacrificing the very thing that made him valuable in the first place: his credibility. The facts make his position even worse. Mark Kelly, a former Navy combat pilot, astronaut, and decorated veteran, reminded service members that they are not required to follow unlawful orders. That is not radical. That is not controversial. That is military law. Every service member learns this under the Uniform Code of Military Justice during basic training. Stephen A. twisted that into an accusation of encouraging insubordination. That was false. When veterans and experts corrected him, Stephen A. did not reflect. He escalated. That was not journalism. That was ego protecting itself. DL Hughley's most devastating critique was not about Stephen A.'s lack of political knowledge. It was about character. Admiral McRaven walked away from everything he built rather than compromise his principles. That is leadership. That is integrity. That is accountability. Stephen A. chose the opposite. Noise over substance, optics over facts, ego over humility. Stephen A. Smith is excellent at sports debate, but politics is not sports. In sports, a bad take costs nothing. In politics, misinformation damages institutions. DL Hughley did not just criticize Stephen A. He ended his credibility as a serious political voice in front of millions, until Stephen A. learns to admit when he is wrong and stops treating politics like a sports argument. Moments like this will keep happening. DL Hughley said the quiet part out loud, and everyone heard it. Do not be a Stephen A. Smith. Be an Admiral McRaven. If you think DL Hughley delivered one of the most brutal takedowns of the year, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more breakdowns that cut through the noise. We will catch you in the next one.